Hello, in this video I wanted to share with you something which is pretty different from the usual fare on this channel, but I wanted to share with you this project that I have access to. It's called Midjourney, and it's a tool which allows you to generate images from text. So I've collected a bunch of prompts that I thought of, specifically from literature, and I was just, gonna explore what happens if we feed it into Midjourney and see what we get. There's sort of like, an unlimited number of interesting prompts that people can probably come up with taken from books, from great literature. But I just, came up with my short list from some of my favorite books. The way this works is you actually type it into this Discord interface here. You just sort of pipe in a command in your prompt, and Midjourney feeds you out an image after about a minute or so. And once you get an image, you can choose to upscale. It actually it will give you 4 variants, as you'll see, like these, and you can upscale them or get variants on one of the variants and things like that. So we'll just sort of play around. We'll see what we get. So from Moby Dick, one of my favorite quotes from Moby Dick is the scene where Pip, who's like the young sort of servant boy on the ship, falls over one of the boats during a whale chase and is left there. And so Melville describes this as follows. He and all his crew, so intent upon his fish that Pip's ringed horizon began to expand around him miserably, right? So that's the description of Pip seeing the ringed horizon of the ocean surround around him as the boat leaves him in the water. By the merest chance, the ship itself at last rescued him. But from that hour, the little Negro went about the deck an idiot. Such at least they said he was. The sea had jeeringly kept his finite body up and drowned the infinite of his soul. And so then we get this description. Carried down alive to wondrous depths where strange shapes of the unwarped primal world glided to and fro before his passive eyes, and the miser merman wisdom revealed his hoarded heaps, and among the joyous, heartless, ever-juvenile eternities Pip saw the multitudinous god omnipresent coral insects that out of the firmament of waters heaved the colossal orbs. He saw God's foot upon the treadle of the loom and spoke it, and therefore his shipmates called him mad. And so from that passage, there's a lot of different images and quotes that you could potentially pull out and feed into Midjourney. So, for example, we could try the multitudinous God omnipresent coral insects that out of the firmament of waters heaved the colossal orbs. So we could just sort of copy that text. We paste into here. Imagine, paste. The multitudinous God omnipresent coral insects out of the firmament of waters heaved the colossal orbs. Of course, there's a lot of tweaking and experimenting you could do. You can imagine just doing the multitudinous God omnipresent coral insects. But let's see what we get. And now we wait. Another one we could pass here is the unwarped primal world that glided to and fro. So we could just try the unwarped primal world and see what that looks like according to Midjourney. Our first prompt here is already rendering. You can see it's 95%. And here we go. So this is the result we get. For the multitudinous God omnipresent coral insects that out of the firmament of waters heaved the colossal orbs, according to Midjourney. So we get these orbs, we get these insects, we get the water, and at this point we can sort of pick which one we wanted to potentially upscale or see variants of. So I'm pretty sad. I think this is very impressive. Obviously this is a subjective, judgment. Different people might judge these results differently. I think this is a pretty awesome, cool result we got here. So, I can imagine, maybe upscaling version 4. You can pick one and potentially see more details, a more detailed, larger version. What else we got here? The unwarped primal world. This is also super cool. Yeah, super abstract, surreal. The unwarped primal world, according to Midjourney. And again, you can imagine, like taking variants, let's say on 3, and let's see what we get. So we can wait on those. Here we go. Super cool. This is what Pip saw when he was dragged down to the bottom of the ocean, according to Midjourney. And here we have an upscaled version I love it, of the multitudinous god omnipresent coral insects that out of the firmament of waters heaved the colossal orbs upscaled, and you could potentially upscale to the max. But that is our first set of Midjourney renders. Another very visual and memorable scene from Moby Dick is towards the middle of the book where they're chasing a whale, and a lot of havoc and pandemonium ensues. A short rushing sound leaped out of the boat. It was the darted iron of Queequeg. Then all in one welded commotion came an invisible push from astern, while forward the boat seemed striking on a ledge. The sail collapsed and exploded. A gush of scalding vapor shot up nearby. Something rolled and tumbled like an earthquake beneath us. The whole crew were half suffocated as they were tossed helter-skelter into the white, curdling cream of the squall. Squall, whale, and harpoon had all blended together, and the whale, merely grazed by the iron, escaped. So maybe we could try tossed helter-skelter into the white, curdling cream of the squall and see what that looks like. What does it look like to be tossed helter-skelter into the white, curdling cream of the squall? Imagine. Here we go. It looks like this, tossed helter-skelter into the white, curdling cream of the squall. So yeah, pretty wild results. I like 2 or 3 the most, for sure. Although these are all quite abstract, which I guess is what you'd expect. Maybe number 2, we can upscale and see what we get. Here we go. So yeah, pretty wild stuff here. Another one of my favorite scenes from Moby Dick is when our narrator Ishmael describes the death of Queequeg, who is now lying in his coffin preparing to die since he's ill. And we get this description of the ailing, sick Queequeg who stoically confronts his fate by lying down in his coffin. Quote, he wasted and wasted away in those few long lingering days till there seemed but little left of him but his frame and tattooing. But all else in him thinned, and his cheekbones grew sharper. His eyes nevertheless seemed growing fuller and fuller. They became of a strange softness of luster, and mildly but deeply looked out at you there from his sickness, a wondrous testimony to that immortal health in him which could not die or be weakened. And like circles on the water, which as they grow fainter expand, so his eyes seemed rounding and rounding like the rings of eternity. And that is Ishmael's description of the dying Queequeg. And so, what does that look like? What does it look like for these eyes growing fainter, expanding, rounding like the rings of eternity? Let's ask Midjourney. And we could say, imagine, let's say, circles on the water, which as they grow fainter expand. Let's say like circles on the water, which as they grow fainter expand, so his eyes seemed rounding and rounding like the rings of eternity. So here we go. Some very interesting stuff. Definitely get the rings of eternity, the water. Pretty cool if you ask me. Now let's move on to some Cormac McCarthy. At the very end of All the Pretty Horses, we have the following description. In 4 days' riding, he crossed the Pecos at Iran, Texas, and rode up out of the river breaks where the pump jacks in the Yates field ranged against the skyline, rose and dipped like mechanical birds. So we're looking at these oil rigs that are going up and down. Like great primitive birds welded up out of iron by hearsay, in a land perhaps where such birds once had been. And so we can ask Midjourney what it thinks of great primitive birds welded up out of iron by hearsay. Great primitive birds welded up out of iron by hearsay. according to Midjourney. So here we go. Look at these. These are pretty wild. As great primitive birds. We could try to upscale the fourth one, I guess. See what we get. Let's do variations on the fourth one first. Let's see what those look like. So of course it took the bird theme pretty literally, which is understandable. So we do have these great primitive birds of metal. Maybe we'll upscale the third one. See what that looks like. Biblically accurate angel like a potato. Yeah, people come up with the coolest things to render. What can I say? Here we go. Great primitive birds welded up out of iron by hearsay. Pretty amazing in my opinion. Of course you could upscale it further. I could upscale it further if I wanted to, but I'm pretty satisfied with that. Continuing with Cormac McCarthy and his incredible descriptions and incredible language. So in Blood Meridian, we have just stunning descriptions of this landscape of the western borderlands in the 1800s. We get descriptions like this. The shadows of the smallest stones lay like pencil lines across the sand, and the shapes of the men and their mounts advanced elongate before them like strands of the night from which they'd ridden, like tentacles to bind them to the darkness yet to come. So what does that look like? What does that look like? Shapes of the men and their mounts like strands of the night from which they'd ridden, like tentacles to bind them to the darkness yet to come. Well, luckily, we can ask Midjourney what it thinks that looks like and get an answer. Shapes of the men and their mounts, like strands of the night from which they'd ridden, like tentacles to bind them to the darkness yet to come. Here we go. Check it out. Amazing. We can upscale number 2. Shapes of the men and their mounts like strands of the night from which they had written, like tentacles to bind them to the darkness yet to come. Yeah, I find these images really beautiful, really cool. And so here it is. Shapes of the men and their mounts like strands of the night from which they had written, like tentacles to bind them to the darkness yet to come. I find this image really beautiful, and of course you can imagine upscaling it more or making variations and further refining and evolving it, but we'll stop there. One of the most famous, or I would say memorable descriptions in Blood Meridian is one of the descriptions of the attacking Indians when they ambushed Glanton's crew. And that's described as follows in Cormac McCarthy's incredible language. Their braids spliced up with the hair of other beasts until they trailed upon the ground, and their horses' ears and tails worked with bits of brightly colored cloth, and one whose horse's whole head was painted crimson red, and all the horsemen's faces gaudy and grotesque, with daubings like a company of mounted clowns, death hilarious, all howling in a barbarous tongue and riding down upon them like a horde from hell, more horrible yet than the brimstone land of Christian reckoning, screeching and yammering and clothed in smoke, like those vaporous beings in regions beyond right knowing, where the eye wanders and the lip jerks and drools. And so, of course, there are so many ways we could potentially cut up that sentence into images for Midjourney to draw. But let's see here. We could try a company of mounted clowns, death hilarious, clothed in smoke. And let's try that. So we're just sort of excerpting some of these descriptors. and running with it. I assume what we're going to get is going to be literal clowns. But let's see. A company of mounted clowns, death hilarious, clothed in smoke. Here we go. A company of mounted clowns, death hilarious, clothed in smoke. Yeah, what a drawing. There's a lot you could do with this still in terms of making variants and upscaling. Let's try to upscale number 2, I think, and see what that looks like. So here you go, a company of mounted clowns, death hilarious, clothed in smoke. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of tweaking and evolving you can imagine doing, but I find that, yeah, really compelling, another really compelling generation by Midjourney here. And there's really no limit, of course, to the scenes you can imagine drawing. I would really love to hear from you what scenes from literature or otherwise you would like to see Midjourney do, and maybe I can make a follow-up video with some of your suggestions. So please do feel free to share those. And yeah, there's a whole nother conversation which we're not having right now, but the conversation of what this means, the future of technology, the future of our relationship to these kind of machine learning tools and artificial intelligence tools. It goes without saying that the kind of implicit knowledge here, meaning like what this software is able to understand about our world, is sort of just staggering. Understanding of styles, understanding of objects, understanding of lighting and scenes, and the interaction between faces and environments and textures and physical objects is just really stunning. And so there's a whole conversation about what this means, in terms of technological disruption, social disruption, automation, and on and on and on. A book that I think about in the context of our relationship with artificial intelligence is, of course, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and the movie based on that book, Blade Runner. And in that book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is actually a very strong emphasis on the theme. The theme of art plays a central role in that book. One of the main androids, the early androids that our protagonist, Rick Deckard, has to retire, is called Luba Luft, and she's an opera singer. And so she's sort of like celebrated in her, society, in her world, as being a successful opera singer. And our protagonist, finds it really a shame that he has to kill her, because he appreciates her art. He appreciates what she's capable of. Eventually, when he does retire her, it's in an art museum where they're looking at the artwork of Edvard Munch. And at one point they admire The Scream by Edvard Munch, and Luba Luft, before she's taken out of the museum to be killed, she asks for a print of an Edvard Munch painting called Puberty, which is a really staggering, stunning, arresting Edvard Munch painting. And it what Philip K. Dick is dealing with, and what that book is dealing with, is sort of the line between the artificial and the real. What happens when creativity is no longer the exclusive domain of human beings? What appreciation for art can an android have, or an artificial intelligence have? And these are questions which are fun to think about, and maybe, who knows, in the coming years and decades might be more and more pressing questions for society to think about. There's a very memorable scene in the movie Blade Runner, Ridley Scott's adaptation of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, where the android Roy Batty is dying, and he delivers his sort of dying monologue. And he says it's on like a rooftop at night, and Rick Deckard is there, to retire him. And he's gonna die now, and he says, "I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in the rain." End quote. And there's just this tension there, this anxiety there, about death, and about the loss of human life versus artificial life, what it means to be alive, and the centrality of memory, the centrality of experience, in what we think of as constituting human life. And so one of my favorite renders of all time on Midjourney, what I love to do, is ask Midjourney to draw, to imagine attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion, and sea beams glittering in the dark near the town Hazard Gate. Because to me, that really cuts to this question of, it really speaks to this question, this anxiety about the relationship between human beings and machine and artificial intelligence. And, we don't know what that android saw. We don't know what Roy Batty is imagining, what he saw when he, thinks of attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion and sea beams glittering in the dark near the town Hazard Gate. But we can ask a different AI, a different artificial machine intelligence to tell us what it sees, what it evokes when it brings to mind attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion and sea beams glittering, sea beams glittering in the dark near the town Hazard Gate. And so here we go. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion, sea beams glittering in the dark near the town Hazard Gate. I think these are really impressive, really incredible renders. I guess we can upscale number 2. And so here you go. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion, sea beams glittering in the dark near the town Hazard Gate. Let me know what you thought of this render. Let me know what you thought of all these renders, of Midjourney, of this kind of technology. I know this video is pretty different from what I usually do. But yeah, let me know if there's anything you would like to see me render. And maybe if I get some submissions, we'll make a follow-up video with what you guys wanna experiment with. So thanks for watching.